Brothers and sisters, my wife Jasmine and I were sealed in marriage for time and all eternity this last Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2019. It was the greatest day of my life. It was the most difficult gift of my life to obtain. If you have not yet been sealed in the temple for time and all eternity, my message is for you. I want to bear my testimony that I know that Jesus is the Christ. He is the way, the truth, and the life, that He is the true vine from which we can receive the greatest of joys and the greatest of powers and blessings. All of us may not be called to high offices in the church like apostle or bishop, but we are all called to be gods and goddesses unto our Heavenly Father through the eternal sealing ordinance. At the Christmas devotional, President Nelson said, "When the Father offers us everlasting life, He is saying in essence, if you choose to follow my Son, if your desire is really to become more like Him, then in time you may live as we live and preside over worlds and kingdoms as we do." How do we obtain the eternal marriage sealing ordinance? That's the question I'd like to ask today. And in my experience, I found 4 answers. 1, hearing and doing the word of the Lord. 2, by receiving power and change through Jesus Christ. 3, by establishing habits of righteousness. And 4, patiently continuing onward until we reach the promised land. 1, hearing and doing the word of the Lord. As a youth, I was born to parents who were sealed in the covenant. I was challenged to read the entire Book of Mormon before my baptism, which I did, and I knew, like I know today, that it is true. I had the desire to marry in the temple as early as I can remember. When I was 14, I thought and dreamt about who my future wife would be. The word of the Lord gives us righteous desires. It really affects the way that we think, the way that we feel, because the word of the Lord is pure intelligence from Heavenly Father. The Apostle James, the brother of Jesus, wrote, "But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves." 2, receiving power and change through Jesus Christ. The prophet Joseph Smith taught, being born again comes by the Spirit of God through ordinances. An ordinance is a sacred act with priesthood authority that unlocks more of God's power and is usually coupled with a covenant or a promise between each of us and God. A sealing ordinance is a covenant The eternal marriage sealing ordinance is a covenant between husband, wife, and God, and brings great power. I went and served a full-time mission, continuing with my personal story, with honor in the Yucatan Peninsula. It was not easy, but at the end, it was so worth it. I thought my journey to being sealed in the temple was coming to its end. Returning to BYU at age 21, feeling blessed and confident with the great job lined up for me, I thought I would soon be married in the temple, no problem. However, this did not happen as I expected. To be brief, I either did not take things very seriously, or I was very naive and fooled, and soon faced trouble and trials of such magnitude that nearly everything I had in my life, every blessing returning from my mission, was taken from me, or so I thought. I could not get over the fact that I had seemingly lost everything. Each time I went to regain something, the devil would say something like, "Oh, yes, you have this now, but things in your life would have been so much better had you chosen more wisely." I was in a serious fall condition as my 20s drew to a close, and I could see no possible way of ever coming back. One of the greatest examples I can think of the dramatic power and change of Jesus Christ is when the Lord worked the miracle of changing water into wine. In this example, I would like to imagine each of us as the water that was then turned into the wine. As I have reflected and pondered about this miracle, I realized that it was unique because it was not a matter of life or death. Jesus blessed and changed the water to fulfill a human need of a higher order. Water is something necessary, something valuable, more valuable than diamonds in a desert to a thirsty traveler, was changed into something that served a higher purpose in the marriage, to celebrate, to bring flavor, to bring joy, to bring exaltation. Pure wine from the vine without corruption, without alcohol, is what the Lord seeks to make of us. Truly, the greater blessings come to those who endure in the covenant, for after much tribulation come the blessings. When I was sealed to my wife Jasmine, I felt a lightning bolt strike my mind and a real change come over me. If I do look back to the past, I now look back to February 14, 2019, because on that day, I testify, I was reborn of the Spirit of the Lord into eternity. 3, how do we receive the eternal sealing ordinance of marriage? 3, by establishing habits of righteous actions. At a certain point back to my personal journey, when I was about 27, I began to seriously live the gospel above all else, as I consistently went to the temple every week, read the Book of Mormon every day, attended all of my meetings, magnified callings, and put the Lord first in everything. Things I had lost began to come back to me, but in ways that were better than ever before. I was willing to live and die single. What point? I was willing and at peace to live and die single if that's what the Lord wanted. I eventually went to a dance, though, on Valentine's Day 2018 and met Jasmine. An experience we had while we were engaged sums all of this redemption up so well. At work, I had mistakenly sent a dreaded reply all email, and felt really bad because it was a serious mistake, and at the time I thought it was going to cause some real problems. I said to Jasmine at about 5:30 on a Friday, at 5:30 p.m. on a Friday, let's just go to the temple. I just need to go to the temple. As we both walked together alone through the basement entrance, suddenly we saw 2 figures before us. One was a security guard, and the other was President Russell M. Nelson, the Lord's prophet. He shook our hand and smiled at us. I had learned that even during times when we may think we have lost opportunities, the Lord still has a glorious redemption for us. He still has a blessing, an even greater blessing to give us if we are willing to put Him first, as was revealed to Lehi and family on their way to the Promised Land. And thus we see that the commandments of God must be fulfilled, and if it so be that the children of men keep the commandments of God, He doth nourish them and strengthen them, and provide means whereby they can accomplish the thing which He has commanded them. Wherefore He did provide means for us while we did sojourn in the wilderness. Righteous habits will build a frame for a temple where the Spirit of the Lord will seek to dwell. If we will prepare ourselves, our minds and hearts for the inspiration, knowledge, and spiritual gifts to go and do miraculous works. 4, and lastly, how do we obtain the eternal marriage sealing ordinance? By continuing in patience to the Promised Land. Now that Jasmine and I have been sealed, we have no money, but we have the power of that ordinance. great dreams and goals and aspirations to prosper financially and raise up a large and righteous family. I'm practicing my talk. I'll call you back. And aspirations to prosper financially and raise up a large and righteous family. Many times I find myself from day to day wishing I could have so many of my desires sooner, that I could press fast forward and speed up the process. Jasmine and I were recently disappointed to learn that she is not pregnant yet, but we know that by continuing on the path, the Lord will guide us in His own time and His own way to the desires of our hearts, that desired promised land. Some of my favorite scriptures from Doctrine and Covenants are, "Therefore, be not afraid of your enemies, for I have decreed in my heart, saith the Lord, that I will prove you in all things, whether you will abide in my covenant, even unto death, that you may be found worthy. For if you will not abide in my covenant, you are not worthy of me. You are not able to abide the presence of God now, neither the ministering of angels. Wherefore continue in patience until ye are perfected." Just want to close with my testimony, saying that I know that this gospel is true and that the ordinances of salvation and exaltation are worth every single sacrifice that we can make. If you have not received this ordinance, or you received it and lost it, I know that Jesus Christ will help you to obtain it. And it's so worth it. And I testify of this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.